Few people have had a bigger hand in pushing the State Bar of Wisconsin to make an institutional commitment to diversity and inclusion than Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Carl Ashely. Hello, I'm Jeff M. Brown, legal writer with the State Bar of Wisconsin. I'm here today with Judge Ashely, who is the recipient of the 2023 Diversity and Inclusion Trailblazer Award. Judge Ashely will receive the award at the Member Recognition Celebration, which is scheduled to be held at the annual meeting and conference in Milwaukee on Thursday night, June 15th. Welcome, Judge Ashely, and congratulations on being named the 2023 Diversity and Inclusion Trailblazer.
Jeff, thank you so very much, and thank the State Bar for selecting me for this very prestigious award. I have to tell you, I'm humbled by being a recipient of this prestigious award. So thank you and all the members of the State Bar for their support of the activities regarding diversity and inclusion, which is so important.
You've been involved in a number of efforts to broaden the diversity of the State Bar over the years. You chaired the State Bar's Diversity Task Force in 2012, and you were instrumental in convincing the Board of Governors to make the Diversity and Inclusion Oversight Committee both a standing committee and one that reports to the Executive Committee. Can you talk about why those changes were important?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the State Bar for having the willingness to take a closer look at what diversity and inclusion means or doesn't mean with regards to what the State Bar was doing. And so my opportunity to be involved as a member and chair of the task force was really going out to the community, meeting with some components of lawyers around the state to get their thoughts about it. So one of the first things we did was, not from our lens, but go out and meet with people, diverse folks, non-diverse folks, and talk about the issue of diversity and inclusion and what that means. How did people feel about their ability to engage in the practice of law? What are the opportunities? Were they marginalized? From law students to lawyers who've been lawyers for years, like old bloods like myself, to try to get a sense of where we were. And what we found out was, not surprisingly, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to consider in trying to make the State Bar and lawyers more welcome in the State Bar, but lawyers to be more welcome in the profession. And that with regards to opportunities for people of color to be involved in work in the law in the state, both small firm, large firm, middle firm, private versus public practice, all those different venues. How is it that we can be more inclusive? And so by being involved in the task force, we really were able to get the pulse. And what we realized is two things. One, a lot of work to do. Two, the State Bar was interested in addressing and tackling the issue. And that's where the committee, Diversity Inclusion Oversight Committee, came into being, supported by the Board of Governors and approved. And now it's a standing part of the State Bar, so there can be continued efforts to address inclusion. And I love it because Larry used to tell me, I think it was, Larry Martin's the president, that you can be invited to the party, but you really want to dance, so you got to get someone to ask you to dance. So there's inclusion and there's diversity. We need to be diverse, but we need to be inclusive. We need to allow people to be involved in a meaningful way, both as professionals in the legal field, but also as members of the State Bar and the committee structures. So there was, looking from the State Bar's perspective, not only were we looking at what's going on outside of the State Bar, we're also focused on what was going on in the State Bar and how were we addressing the issues of inclusion in the committees, the divisions. How were we reacting to allowing that to happen? And there was a lot of good things done to just raise the consciousness, but also to expect some different outcomes.
Well, I love that Larry used the dancing metaphor. I think most of us can remember back to middle school, and at least most of us spent at least one dance up against the bleachers in our corduroys without dancing the whole night. So great metaphor by Larry. You've been a Wisconsin lawyer for 40 years this year. Has the State Bar become a more diverse and inclusive place in that time?
I think the answer to that is yes. By no means are we there. And the reality is it's going to take consistent effort to keep engaging folks because memories are quickly fade about, oh, how important that was. And so having markers, and I know that Corey Ashely is now the chair of the Diversity Inclusion Oversight Committee. I'm always very proud of her. She's been very proactive on trying to do things to continue that effort. And I know she's doing a great job. But it's also the Board of Governors, Larry Martins and his staff staying focused on this. And I know that Larry is not going to let up on this. And so the issues that we started to tackle just need to be incorporated and reevaluated and to set markers about what we're doing. So now to the point they're saying, are things different since I became a lawyer in 1983? Oh, yeah. And do we got a long way to go? I still talk to my colleagues here in Milwaukee, District 1, about how lawyers are perceived in the courtroom, how they're treated, how they feel maybe marginalized. I mean, let's be frank, we still got work to do. Is it better than it used to be? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that we're anywhere close to where we need to be. So it needs to be a concerted effort to continue to push the issue of diversity and inclusion. And remember, that's broad. It's not just people of color, it's age, it's kind of law that you practice, where you practice, rural versus urban. So the definition of diversity is very broad. And if you look at it within the context of what was come up with the committee, it's broad, but even that was limiting because as we were looking at it, there were more things we needed to look at when we talk about diversity and inclusion. So it's an ongoing battle, Jeff, to continue to up the ante and being focused on addressing the issues of those subcomponents of the legal profession as they reach out and say, hey, I'm here. Do you see me?
Well, I was going to ask what more remains to be done. You talked about that a bit there in the end, toward the end of your second question. So I guess I'll ask, do you have faith, or what do you think of this newer crop of lawyers, the Generation Z or Generation Y, the younger ones coming up? Do you think they bring a different perspective that might help move this along a little quicker? And if so, what have you noticed that makes you think that?
Well, I'll have to tell you, and happily I'll tell you, that the younger lawyers that are coming up are less patient, less willing to wait for people to have better understanding of the need to address diversity and inclusion. And I've had those discussions with them, and I'm like, oh boy, I hear you. And they're like, Judge Ashely, you guys are too accommodating. You're too willing to allow them to adapt to the requests. We want you to push harder. And you know what? I like that. I like that because I think as an older judge, my expectation level is probably different than theirs, having practiced for so long and knowing that where I am now compared to what it was for the people I stood on their shoulders, it's a lot different. But it was the pushing that they did that allowed it to be a better circumstance for me as a person of color to feel respected, to feel like I'm involved, to feel that I'm at the table. But we still have a lot to do. Now, I'm in the judiciary, and I know that there are people committed to more diversity and inclusion, but still, when I go to administrative meeting with the chief judges from around the state and the personnel, you look in the room, ain't no, who else is at that table of color is very limited. Does that need to change? Yes. Is there an effort to make it change? Yes. Is it happening quick enough? No. So I guess what I'm trying to say from my standpoint to your point, Jeff, the younger folks, the Gen X, they're saying, let's move this along faster. And I'm not balking at that. I think that their drive to make it happen faster is appropriate, meaningful. How you get there is another thing. It's got to be done in a way that is productive. And most of these young lawyers are willing to talk in a way that's supportive of listening to everybody's viewpoint, but they want some results. So to your answer, I expect the push to be, and I think the state bar is amenable to trying to move this along, look at the data, look where we've been, and important looking at the data as to where have things changed. Are some of the methodologies that we're trying to incorporate been effective in creating more inclusion and diversity? And if it hasn't, then we need to do something different. And if it is, we need to do more of that. But we need to be open to suggestions and opportunities to do things to keep this on the forefront.
Amen. Amen. So sounds like some encouraging words for the future. Judge Ashely, thank you. And again, congratulations. And we will see you at the annual meeting and conference in Milwaukee in June.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate taking your time to talk to me.